Welcome to Storylines Live, the only podcast that explores the meaning and the power of the most important story in business. The one that answers why somebody would buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you. This is the story that defines the very character and nature of an organization. At Vendilli, we call this your capital S story. In each episode, we feature guests who have great insights on business storytelling, who can share their experiences and key learnings to help you and your business do a better job of sharing your capital S story to deliver remarkable business results. In this episode, we're honored to have as our guest Kylee Ingram, the co-founder of Wizer Technologies. As you'll see in the episodes, it's fair to say Kylie's a little bit ahead of the curve, not only because of what she does, but because she's in Australia. I'm in the Eastern time zone in the States. So she's literally a day ahead, roughly. Kylee is foremost a creator. She's a storyteller, a technologist, an entrepreneur who spent her career blending creativity with innovation. Now, she began in sports television and moved into documentaries and produced and directed programs seen in more than 100 countries. Her interactive work has been used by some of the world's largest brands and recognized at South by Southwest, props on that, Cannes, very nice, and the Sports Technology Awards, including projects ranging from Habitat the Game, a climate change adventure played by kids worldwide, to Team Tap, a fundraising app used by global sports franchises. Kylee is co-founder and CEO at Wizer, which is a decision intelligence platform that helps organizations identify the right voices, map cognitive strengths, and build smarter, more incisive panels. Wizer's decision profiles and live recommendation engine are redefining how companies understand their decision-making teams. She served in 2 entrepreneur in residence positions and advised leaders across creative, tech, and impact sectors. Kylee, welcome to Storylines Live. Please feel free to share anything about your background that I might have missed or that you think our audience would benefit from knowing.
Thank you so much for having me, Paul. It's lovely to meet you. I think you've captured it all there. It was very long, but I think I just wanted to say what a privilege documentary making is. I think it's one of those, things like you're doing. It's always lovely to talk to different people from backgrounds, and none of them are ho-hum about what they're doing. They love their subject matter, and you get to take these deep dives into other people's worlds, which I think is fantastic. So I think that's all I wanted to add. But I think the one project I did that relates to decision intelligence in the documentary world was a project called Crowd TV, where I was really interested in the wisdom of crowds, and we got a crowd together to create a TV project, which I think was that beginning link into decision intelligence.
We're going to have to talk more about that because, the wisdom of crowds is something that should be prevalent on social media, but doesn't seem to be.
No, no, it's definitely the loudest voice wins. And I think there's that, all that research, 60% of online comments now are bots or whatever, and,
Yeah.
people raging against a computer.
Anything.
Yeah.
Don't rage against anything. It's quite ridiculous.
Mm.
Well, Kylee, we really appreciate you being with us for this episode. I always ask our guests about their capital S story. And, we define it a certain way in our work, at answering the 4 questions, why somebody would buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you. And we ask our guests, which of those 4 right now for you, where you're at in your business, is most important to you?
Yeah, obviously you want clients to buy, but I've actually spent the last 6 months in a partnership program, which has been fantastic. And I think when you're looking at growth and scale, it's a really interesting way to look at it, to look at the company you want to work with and how do you get win-wins for both of them, and be really clear in your process about how that happens and make it very easy for people to partner with you. So I'm very into partnerships in that strategy for our growth at Wizer.
One of the things we've learned in our storytelling work, Kylie, is that there's rarely just one audience for your story. And that's what we try and capture with this process we described, where I have to say, abbreviate like a bullwhip. BWIP. There's these different audiences. But speaking of audiences, I did want to read your bio because you've had quite the journey. And a big part of Storylines Live is understanding the personal stories of the guests that we have on the show. So, would you mind taking a little bit of time just to kind of explain how you went from sports television to documentaries to now? I mean, you're in the field of decision science. Wow. How did all this happen?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think age helps you because you have a lot of time to do it, so young people shouldn't worry too much. But I really think, for me, it's about being curious and having a good sense of humor. I think got a good sense of humor. My family may disagree, and also resilience. Resilience goes a long way, and passion obviously gets you. I think it keeps your heart beating even in the toughest of times. And entrepreneurship is really tough. Like, it's the toughest thing I think you can do in some ways. And I think from my TV background, I started with IMG, which a lot of people would know as,
Yeah.
they started in Cleveland, huge organization, and we started the Australian branch. So I was very young then. And because it was a new company, I got to do a lot of everything. I got to production manage, I got to direct. And I think that set me up well for doing my own business. But at some point, my late 20s, I thought, oh gosh, I'm just making, I was doing the World Surf Tour, I was on the Soccer World Cup, which I loved as a woman in sport. In that environment, World Soccer, I was one of only two female producers in a couple of hundred
Right.
in that instance. So it was pretty cool, but at the same time, cool didn't seem to cut enough of it for me. Like, I wanted more. And that's when I went into documentary, and I really enjoyed it, but it's hard. We had a staff of 10, 15 people, and we were trying to produce really good documentaries in Australia, which we did do, but it was a hard business. And there was a key moment when Screen Australia wanted TV producers to start thinking about, I think it was called interactive at the time. And so they offered us grants for that. I think they were just investing in good ideas. And I got 2 back-to-back nominations at Cannes for things I came up with. And I was like, oh, this is in a way more fun than TV because it's a hell of a lot quicker in
Yeah.
some ways, to have that initial idea looked at. And the other thing with TV is there's a few gatekeepers for each. BBC has a few, and it's very hard. You are relying on individual people to decide what goes on TV, and sometimes you're sitting there going, "How did you know?" You don't want to get in your head, but you're like, "How did that get commissioned?" kind of thing. And that was where Crowd TV came from. I was like, "There's got to be a better way of creating content to see." So we did that project where we got, we found an investor, and we made, it was just a documentary that, it was just done in a part of Sydney, and it packed the theatre, and I thought, this is cool. So then my co-founder knew that I did that, and his research was in wise crowds. And he found out that he did his research in it, and he found you get wise crowd effects with as few as 6 people. You need diversity and expertise, which we know from the big books about wisdom of crowds and all the other stuff that's written out there. And you need independence. So we started to think about tech that builds that. And by the time, we're doing this, I'd created a lot of tech and made a lot of mistakes, and I've been entrepreneur in residence. And I'd also lived in Boulder, Colorado for 2 years, where I had sat in a tech accelerator, and I'd realized there was a process. It's not just about throwing darts at a wall. There's actually a process for how to make this happen. And I was like, gosh, I wish I knew this earlier. Like, I could have, used the process to work it out. So, his research came into it. And then we met this amazing woman, Dr. Juliette Burke at Deloitte, and she had written a book called Which Two Heads Are Better Than One? And it was about decision frameworks and styles. And her research had never been codified. So we spoke to Juliette and started working with Juliette, and really her research has been the crux of what we've created. So that's kind of how I went from one side of things to the other. But I think it's all creation, which it possibly is the underlying theme of it all.
Wow. Well, that's fascinating. And the wisdom of crowds and how decisions are made. One of the reasons we wanted to have you on the show is because you can tell the greatest story in the world, but if it doesn't move people's hearts and minds and inspire action, so what? Right?
Mhm. Definitely.
A big part of that, I think, is tied in your research. Before we start to dig into all that, a couple of questions that I think will frame up where we go. First of all, how does your personal story help you in your work on a daily basis? What is it about Kylie, the person, the professional, that you feel is most important in your contributions to your work?
Yeah, well, I think I've got a lot of stamina, which helps helps the
There you go.
organization. And I think the practice of listening when you're a documentary maker really helps and connecting with people. I think it doesn't matter what you're doing, sales, whatever, you have to have a connection and I'm very open to things. So I hope I'm generally not defensive when people tell me it's all crap, which is fine. You've got to, it's an entrepreneur, you've got to listen to that, Oh, my uncle made that last year or whatever. And you're like, okay, great. So you've got to be open and not defensive. And even when things are wrong, it's just, you learn over the years, just don't sweat it, just keep on your course and don't worry about it because you can't comparing yourself to others is what makes you sad, saddest in life. And there's a lot of research around that as well.
Wow, the wise words for sure. And hearing your background in journalism, I have to say that one of the greatest skills for me has been to develop that skill of listening. It's amazing what people will share with you if you just shut up and listen.
It is incredible. And when you're in documentary situations where you're talking about there's some pretty heavy stuff that goes on. And it can't be about you. It has to be about the other person. And I think that gets you a hell of a long way in life.
Oh boy, what you just said is really important, I think, to decision science and also storytelling. And we're going to take a break in a couple of minutes. When we come back, I really want to dig into that. But before we go into the break, obviously, we started Storylines Live because we have a particular take on storytelling and a way of thinking it. But I also like to ask our guests for their take on storytelling. I mean, obviously, you've been a storyteller in a lot of environments. What does storytelling mean to you, Kyle?
Yeah, well, as I think I alluded to, I think it's key. It doesn't matter what you're doing, how you talk about it will be the way it's picked up. And if you don't have other people picking it up, it's never going to go anywhere. I think it's the backbone, and it's literally from selling your product to how you're communicating your strategy internally. Like you have to do it. And I think I've heard of you've heard of people like the guy at Salesforce or Zappos. I don't think their values are actually revolutionary, but I think it's the way they're telling their story that people latch onto. And I think when people are in those big businesses, that when you can communicate the values or whatever it is and give those people inspiration, because people need meaning when they go to work. And I think storytelling is that part of it. So I love stories. I love true ones in particular. And I just think the more you can pull out of that, the better for everybody, and especially people that work for you. It's so key to bringing them on the journey.
So true, so true. And when we talk about storytelling at our firm, we're trying to help our clients understand that the story really does have to be, as you said, about somebody else. Frequently, and I'm sure we're going to get into this in a few minutes here, when you're talking about leaders and communicating and sharing a story, if you really want to move people and have them head in a certain direction, you need to be talking about them and they need to see themselves in the story. And as you pointed out, authentic stories are what moves hearts and minds. We joked at the beginning of the episode about social media. One of the things that social media has done is made all of us cynics and skeptics. And so if you're going to be sharing a story, it's got to be authentic. Folks, we're going
Definitely.
to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to dig into the role of decision science and helping people to take action. Folks, thanks again for joining us for this episode of Storylines Live with our guest, Kylee Ingram of Wizer Technologies, who's become an expert in decision science after having a very successful career in sports television and documentaries. Kylie, I'm sure a lot of people are asking themselves, what the heck is decision science and why should I care? And I suspect you have an answer.
Yes, I do. A pre-prepared one. No, just kidding. Wizer is Wizer. We call Wizer a decision intelligence platform, and
Mhm.
decision making is a subjective problem, and people need to know who should be involved in a decision. Whereas a lot of companies we see, less than 3% of the people are involved in decisions in their organization. So, how do we turn that into a data driven decision rather than it being an emotional one? So, we say with Wiser, we can put a data scientist into the room with you. Who's missing? What biases have you got? Because a lot of the decision, if we say our objective is to help the world make better decisions, really what we're doing is breaking down those structures that stand in the way of better decisions. And most of them are
Mhm.
biases. And Juliet in her book, listed three of them from social, time to whatever. And part of the problem is people with similar cognitive diversity to themselves to be in the
Yeah.
room, and it sways the decision too much. So when we're looking at what we do at Wiser, we do three things differently, I think, from anything else out there. We've got decision profiles, which will break down what that cognitive diversity is. So that means you come at decisions in different ways. Are you looking at outcomes? Are you looking at people? And people have a primary and secondary in that. So we look at that, and the individual learns about themselves. And you can't fake that. If you don't have one of them in a company, you can kind of imagine thinking like that, but it's not sustainable. So you need to understand what's missing. Then we're also looking at that outward diversity that's relevant to decisions, which is age, gender, and ethnicity, and that you can go deep into how they play out. It's really interesting. There's jury studies, there's all these different studies that are out there on that. And then we're looking at expertise. So that piece where you need to know if you're going to fly a plane, like Boeing, one of their big problems was they took all the engineers out of the room. So doors started falling off planes. Our Wiser would tell us live who's missing, and
Yeah.
it also has a recommendation engine to who might be there. So it's trying to help organizations or people just form that wisdom when they're ready to go. It'll tell you how far skewed you are in certain ways. So it's just trying to correct the biases that you might have.
So you said a few really interesting things there, Kylie. Number one, diversity is obviously about age, gender, ethnicity, but it's also about the way people make decisions. Is that right?
It's a way it's about their cognitive, the way they come at things. So,
Yes.
yes, it's about whether they're worried about, some people will look at outcomes, some people want the evidence, so the
Mhm.
analytics, some are explorers, so they want all the options in the room. Some people are very conscious about people, and it's not that they're people, it's that they understand the what other people bring to a decision. So you've got to have all, we've created seven. You need to have all seven to have that cognitive diversity. And in Juliet's research, she found by having that and a leader that is open to that, you end up with a 30% reduction in decision error and a
Wow.
20% increase in innovation.
Wow. A 30% reduction in errors and a 20% increase in innovation. And so what you folks have done is create essentially seven decision profiles.
Yep.
Fascinating.
But they're just part of the story when you're mixing it together. Our system might say live, hey, you've only got people over 60 in this decision. Is that all right? And I think that, the thing is, when we're in rooms, we're often in think tanks with people that are, heads of HR, and they're like, oh, we get so much pushback. Whereas one of the great things about Wiser is a piece of technology, we're not in the room arguing personally. We just
Yeah.
show them what's missing, and we see people self-correct. So they're being more mindful before they go in about that composition of the room.
Mhm. So now, Kylie, it's science and it's technology. What is this a web-based platform, a mobile platform? How does Wiser deliver its insights?
Yeah, we're a web-based platform. You can use it on a mobile, but it's not an app. And so, you can go and do your decision profile for free as an individual. And then as an organization, we see 90% of our clients starting with decision profile mapping. So they can go in and map their organization. What are their decision profiles? And we let them know across groups or teams or panels as to how they're sitting with what kind of decision they want to make. But it's then they can go in and say, this is the decision we want to make, and it'll show them who they've put in the room, and it'll show them who might be missing. And one of the really powerful things it does is it unearths talent, because a lot of the time what we're seeing in the statistically at the moment is 40 to 60% of people in that recommendation engine have not been invited into that decision room before.
Wow,
Mm.
that's amazing. So, I mean, if you think again about, one use of effective storytelling is to move people in a particular direction. If you don't have the right people in the room, doesn't matter what story you're going to share with them, you're not going to get them there. And I would suspect that the story will be better if it's more inclusive of all of the voices that need to be in the room. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so it's about you don't need more, you just need the right ones. And it doesn't slow the process down. It actually gives it more structure. And the people you'll see, you get that whole breadth of understanding of a situation. Juliet tells a good story about Enron in the book. Enron looked like it had a diverse board, but when you analyze them, they were almost exclusively, I think it was 3 different types, so they're missing 4. I went back and we've just built a new tool actually that can generate a decision profile for an external person. And it'll tell you with what accuracy we think it's at, because a client came to us and asked about could they use it for communication, which we can come back to. But I went back through and looked at some of these boards people spoke of, and we had a disaster in Australia the other day with it was the Adelaide Writers Festival, and they threw out a writer, and I did the board, and I thought our tech had broken, but 8 out of the 9 had a primary or secondary in risk. So you think that they'd be really good at risk, but they were assessing the wrong risk, and they didn't have people in the room that'd go, hey, these are all the risks. And I thought, what's going on? Like, I thought I was wrong. I reassessed them. I did, because I was putting external inputs in. And yeah, no, five out of 9 had primary things as risk. So you'd think, oh, they'll be really good. But it went the other way. They completely misread what the risk was, and it led to them all having to leave the board.
Wow. Well, that's a great example. Um, I often ask on the flip side, is there a success story that you can share with the audience?
Yeah, we have a few, because it's funny. One of the biggest take ups of the technology is actually for communities, community building. So we're looking at how to get the right people in the room for that stakeholder engagement piece in Indigenous organisations. So that's one of my favourite stories. But it's also what I've enjoyed too is the scale ups that have taken it up, because they're not in the bit where they've spent millions with consultants building out decision frameworks or whatever, and they see the ease of the technology to just be mindful about decisions. And so it's nice, because I think they're very forward thinking entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
because they're at that point where they're scaling, and to just be able to put in a process that they can almost put in an afternoon and understand their people. When you get in the room, because I'm still in the room with clients, when you get in the
Yeah.
room with them and you see them and you can take them through the makeup of their people, just watching the light bulb turn on, and it's those few scale ups that we've done so far, and that community building piece that I've really, really enjoyed.
Well, and that was the next question I was going to ask you. I think you kind of answered it, but if you had more to add, that'd be great. What brings you the greatest satisfaction in your work?
Look, it's back to that creation thing. I'm happiest when I create, even when, as an entrepreneur, you've got to kind of one day be the head of sales and then the head of, you're like, it's really hard to adjust and change gears. And I know I'm happiest when I create. So AI now makes that so easy for me. It's scary, with coding. And one of the latest versions of that was the communication tool I was talking about.
Yeah.
A client came to us and said, could we use your decision profiles to work out how to communicate with people? And we said, yeah, how are you doing it now? And rather than sending off my dev team on, I think we need to try this, I was able to code it all myself to the MVP and test it. So I got it to that point where we got 1,000 users in 48 hours. And it was so, it wasn't, it wasn't behind a paywall. It was, but I did all the coding. I did the prompt. I was in heaven. I just loved it.
It's great, Kylie. That's a
Yeah.
great story. Speaking of storytelling, and it's also a great use case as well. Well, this has been great to have you on this episode. Really, really enjoyed my time with you. I think it's critically important to let people know how they can best reach you.
Yeah, so Wizer.business, W-I-Z, little, Wizer dot business, or LinkedIn. I'm very available, Kylie with the double E. Yeah, would love to hear from you if anything about decision intelligence resonates with your listeners.
And for the audience, they can go to wizer.biz and they can do a decision pro.
Yeah, do their own. Just go, it's up the top and just says, get your decision profile now, and yeah, learn about yourself. It'll give you a full walkthrough online as to what you come out as, and learn a little bit about how you sit in the room and make decisions. Understanding that about yourself is incredibly important.
My wife tells me self-awareness is important. I wonder why she said, I'm just kidding. That's it. Yeah.
Yes.
Kylie, once again, it's been so great to have you on Storylines Live. Thank you so much. Folks, we will put in the show notes the wiser.biz address, LinkedIn. I think also I need to get the full title of Juliet's book from you. We'll do that offline. That seems like it's been foundational to your work. And I want to say thanks again to our audience. Thanks for being here with us on this episode of Storylines Live, the only podcast that explores the power and the meaning of the most important story in business, the one that answers why somebody would buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you. This is the story that defines the character and nature of an organization. That's why we call it your capital S story. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next time on Storylines Live.